Okay, let's unpack this. If you play bass and you love getting those really gnarly, fuzzy tones, the
Oh,
shrug.
yeah, the eternal problem.
How do you get that huge, rich, fuzzy grit without just like vanishing from the mix entirely? You hit the fuzz pedal and bam, that massive low end you need just sounds like someone threw a heavy blanket over your cab.
That is the classic low-end collapse. It's really a physics issue that bass players have been fighting since, the late 60s? Standard guitar fuzzes just can't handle bass frequencies.
Exactly. So today we're diving deep into this little copper box that pretty much gave bassists the shortcut they needed for mix-friendly fuzz for, well, over a decade now. The MXR M84 Bass Fuzz Deluxe.
Yeah, this wasn't just another pedal. It really changed the game in a lot of ways.
Our mission here is to really pull apart the circuit design, specifically that dual blend architecture everyone talks about that made this thing such a staple, and why it became so important for modern bass tone.
Yeah, it's about understanding not just what it does, but how it manages to work so well in a live band situation. It's a crucial bit of kit.
So the M84, it hit the scene back in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just some random release, right? It was part of MXR really building out their dedicated bass line.
Yeah.
You had the M80 DI Plus then, the M87 compressor, the M82 envelope filter.
Right. They were clearly serious about making tools for bass players, not just slightly tweaked guitar stuff.
And the design goal here was super specific, wasn't it? They were working directly with bassists.
Absolutely critical point. They weren't just like cloning an old Big Muff or something. They talked to working players, session guys, touring musicians who all basically said, look, we love that messy silicon fuzz sound.
Yeah, that classic EHX vibe.
But we need to keep our fundamental note clear. We need the punch to cut through.
Yeah.
So it was born out of, actual need.
And the look of it, too, it feels right. Fully analog in that classic tough MXR box.
Yep, built like a tank.
That copper finish with the black graphics, it kind of screams aggressive tone, doesn't it? But it's practical, made for the road.
Totally. And under the hood, that's where the really clever stuff happens. It's a discrete transistor fuzz circuit.
Okay, so kind of old school voicing there.
Yeah, a bit unpredictable, classic feel. But paired with a really smart, modern tone shaping section. And the whole thing revolves around that dual blend idea.
Right, dual blend. When I first heard about it, it sounded, I don't know, maybe a bit complicated. Can you walk us through where those two sounds actually meet? Because that's the magic, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. The genius of it is that your clean bass signal, your core tone, and the fuzz signal run on completely separate parallel paths.
Okay.
The fuzz path that does its thing, clipping, compressing, saturating, but your clean tone stays totally clean, high headroom, untouched. Pristine, really. They don't interact at all until the very final mix stage inside the pedal.
And thinking about, like, the physics of distortion, why is that separation so vital? Why does fuzz normally kill the low end so badly?
Well, distortion, especially high-gain fuzz, works by basically chopping off the peaks and troughs of the waveform, right? Clipping it.
Right.
And in doing that, it heavily compresses the signal and tends to really emphasize the mid-range harmonics, often at the expense of the extreme lows and highs. So if you shove your big, fat, say, 80 hertz fundamental through a typical fuzz circuit,
It just gets squashed.
exactly, it loses all its power, its headroom, and just kind of disappears. The M84 avoids that because that clean path guarantees your fundamental is still there. And importantly, the overall frequency response stays wide, like 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. That 20 hertz floor, that's where the real rumble lives, and the clean path protects it.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So how do we control these two paths? 4 knobs give you all the control. You got dry and wet.
Correct. Dry is simply the level of your clean, unaffected bass tone, your foundation.
Got it.
Wet controls the volume of just the fuzz signal on its separate path. Then you've got the fuzz knob itself.
And that's just gain for the fuzz path, right?
Exactly. How much saturation and distortion you're adding only to the wet signal.
And then tone. This seems crucial because it only affects the fuzz.
Precisely. The tone knob shapes the high-frequency content of the fuzz path alone. So you can make the fuzz dark and woolly, or really bright and aggressive, cutting, without ever messing with the low-end clarity of your dry signal. It's really targeted EQ just for the dirt.
And there's a fun fact connection here, right? This whole dual path idea came from somewhere else.
Yeah, the sources mention it actually grew out of the development for the M80 Bass DI Plus AM. The engineers found that when they blended the distortion channel on that unit with the clean channel in parallel, the low-end articulation was surprisingly good.
Ah, interesting. But wait, if they figured that out on a DI, why make a dedicated aggressive fuzz pedal? Why not just I don't know, build it into a multi-effect or something? Was it about keeping it analog?
That's a really good question. I think two main reasons. First, the distortion on the M80 wasn't really that vintage-style splatty fuzz. It was more of a preamp drive.
Okay, different character.
Totally. Second, fuzz, proper fuzz, is pretty demanding. To get that really thick, saturated sound people wanted, you kind of need a dedicated analog transistor circuit working on its own. The M84 gives you that pure analog fuzz plus the safety net of the clean blend, all in one small pedal. Best of both worlds, really.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we know how it works. Let's talk about the actual sound. People always say massive yet articulate. It keeps the subs, but adds that grind on top.
Yeah, and what's really cool is how dynamic it is. Because it's that discrete transistor circuit, it cleans up, well, not cleans up totally, but it reacts to how hard you play.
Oh, interesting.
Lighter touch gets you more of a mild, gritty overdrive. Dig in harder, and it just blooms into full-on fuzz. And once you push that fuzz knob past noon, maybe 1 o'clock, you start to get this really nice, smooth compression, almost like a tube amp breaking up. It adds sustain, but doesn't kill your punch.
That tube-like feel is often the secret sauce, isn't it? Separates the good fuzz from just noisy harshness. And the recommended sweet spot generally seems to be around a 50-50 dry-wet mix for live playing.
Yeah, that seems to be the common starting point. Balances that clarity and aggression really well, but it's super flexible. Let's give folks listening, maybe someone new to this pedal, a few concrete settings.
Good idea. Let's use clock settings. What about that classic 70s sound?
Okay, for that thick, woolly, vintage warmth, think fuzz around 2 o'clock, and keep the tone fairly dark, maybe around 11 o'clock. Blend to taste, probably near 50-50. It gets kind of messy, in a good way, but that clean signal keeps it solid underneath.
Right, like shag carpet you can hear. Okay, what if you need to cut through some really dense guitars, like in modern rock?
Then you'll want to push the fuzz harder, maybe 3 o'clock, and definitely open up that tone control, maybe push it up to 2 o'clock as well. That brightness on the fuzz path really helps it slice through without making the whole bass sound thin.
Gotcha. And what about going totally over the top like a synth sound?
Yeah, the fuzz wall. Max out the fuzz, max out the wet level, and maybe even pull the dry back a bit, say to 9 or 10 o'clock. It gets super compressed, massive, almost like a square wave synth lead. It stops sounding like a bass guitar and becomes this huge texture.
That range is pretty impressive. It really does seem to sit in this perfect spot in the market, doesn't it? It's got the analog warmth, but with modern control.
Yeah, it bridges that gap between, say, vintage fuzz pedals that can be a bit unruly and maybe some more modern, precise distortions.
How does it stack up against, say, the bass version of the Big Muff?
Well, the EHX bass Big Muff Pi, it's often really thick, sometimes quite scooped in the mids, which is a cool sound, definitely iconic, but sometimes it can get a little lost in a really busy mix.
Okay.
And then you have things like this Vex Woolly Mammoth. Super thick, tons of sub bass, but it's known for being quite gated.
Hold on, gated. For listeners who aren't deep into fuzz, what does that mean in practice? How does it sound?
Gated fuzz basically means the sound cuts off really abruptly when your signal drops below a certain level. There's no natural decay, it just slams shut.
Oh, okay.
Which can be cool for certain sounds, like industrial stuff, maybe really staccato riffs, but it can feel a bit unnatural sometimes. The M84 doesn't really do that gating thing. It has a smoother, more continuous sustain, which makes it maybe a bit more versatile across different genres, from funk to rock to heavier stuff.
Right, that makes sense. So putting it on your board, where does it typically live? Any recommendations?
The general advice is pretty consistent. Put it after your compressor, so the signal hitting it is nice and even.
Stabilizes the dynamics going in.
Exactly. But definitely put it before stuff like chorus, flanger, delay, reverb. You want to fuzz the core tone, then add the time-based effects later.
Okay. And I saw a note about using it with a preamp, like the MXR M81, something about an EQ boost.
Yeah, the little tip was to try a subtle boost around 800 hertz after the M84, maybe using the M81 as EQ. That 800 hertz range is often where the ear picks up definition and clarity in the low mids for bass.
Ah, so it helps the articulation of the fuzz cut through, not just adding mud.
Precisely. It gives the fuzzy notes a bit more edge to sit nicely above the kick drum and rhythm guitars. Smart little trick.
And it seems like this pedal plays really well with others, stacking-wise.
Oh, it's a great team player, largely because of that clean blend, preserving the core tone. Stack it with an envelope filter, like the M82.
Oh yeah, instant synth bass.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because the fundamental is still strong. The filter tracks really well, give you those big, stable synth textures, Or run it into a chorus, like the M83. You get this wide, swirling, modulated fuzz that sounds a lot like old analog polysynths. It holds together really well.
It's really no wonder this thing is still around and popular over 10 years later.
Not at all. It got rave reviews right away because it genuinely solved that core fuzz versus clarity problem for so many players. And when you have guys like Juan Alderete or Justin Meldal-Johnson, real tone chasers praising it.
Yeah, that carries weight. It hit staple status pretty quickly.
So wrapping it up, the M84's impact was huge. It didn't just fix one pedal's issue, it kind of set a new benchmark for bass effects. That clean blend idea, keeping the dry path sacred, that became almost mandatory for good bass dirt pedals that came after it.
You can see its DNA in later MXR stuff like the M85 bass distortion, for sure.
Absolutely. And probably influenced designers beyond MXR too, just making everyone think harder about preserving low-end integrity.
Which brings us to maybe a final thought for everyone listening. The M84's whole success story is about balancing the crazy processed sound with the clean core signal, right?
Exactly. Understanding that balance is key.
So it makes you wonder how many other classic effects, maybe things beyond just distortion, could be improved or even transformed just by adding a simple independent dry-wet blend.
That's interesting. You mentioned modulation earlier. Phasers, flangers, sometimes they can thin out your tone a bit with filtering.
Right. Maybe your favorite old phaser pedal is just missing that parallel clean signal to keep its body. Or imagine a delay where only the repeats get processed, but your core dry note stays perfectly solid and centered.
Yeah, it opens up possibilities. The M84 really proved that having control over your fundamental tone is, well, fundamental. Something to think about next time you're staring at your pedal board, definitely.